Welcome to the Sacred Feminine Power podcast, where we explore the many facets of feminine power and why it is so important for women and for men to step into this power in our world at this time. This is Emmy from Feminine Revered, and my magical guest for today is James Twyman. For over 3 decades, James has been a global force for peace, leading millions of people in synchronized peace meditations across the world. As a New York Times bestselling author, he has written 24 books, including The Moses Code, and recorded 22 music albums, selling over 350,000 copies. Beyond his work as an author and musician, James is a filmmaker, having directed or produced 7 feature films, including the award-winning Redwood Highway. A Franciscan Episcopal priest, James founded Namaste Village, an interfaith spiritual community in Ajijic, Mexico. I hope I got that right. Now
You
home
actually got
to
it perfect. Most people never get that right, but you hit it perfect.
Lovely, thank you. Now home to 45 residences where people from around the world come together in a shared vision of unity and transformation. Now, James is turning his focus to one of the most urgent challenges of our time, the deep polarization dividing families, businesses, and nations. His latest book, I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You, How to Depolarize Your Family, Business, Country, and the World, is more than a call to awareness. It's a movement. With a mission to mobilize millions as depolarizing agents, James is dedicated to bridging divides, fostering understanding, and healing the fractures that threaten our global community. Wow, this is also beautiful and so very important in a world that indeed is so very divided in so many ways. So I am so delighted to have you on the show, James. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Excuse me. It's so wonderful to be here. Great to talk about this topic. And as you said, this is something that's happening all throughout the whole world. This is an, a challenge for humanity. You're in Helsinki. I'm in Mexico. We can look at the US. We can look at so many countries and see that the issue of, or what I call the real pandemic of needing to be right. The idea that we always have to be right, and if you're with me, you're fine. If you're not, if you have a different opinion, then you're not. This is what we need to address, and I'm so happy to talk to you about it today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation as well. And I've started reading your book. I'm maybe about halfway through, and it's really resonating very strongly for me as well. And what you shared there about the pandemic being right, I recognize so much of that in myself as well, especially over the past 4 or 5 years, and how strongly my opinions were starting to cause divisions and polarization even amongst people whom I love dearly, with family members and so on. And through your book, you've really gotten me to think about how important it is to very consciously, very deliberately to bring through that angle of compassion, consideration, tolerance, and love, which is really the central message of your book, isn't it?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think that the title kind of says it all. I don't know, maybe I love you. In fact, I'll tell you the story really quickly of how that title came about. It was toward the beginning of COVID, and I was talking with my younger brother who loves to argue with me. He tends to be much more on the right side, where I tend to be much more on the left side of things. And we were arguing, and finally I just got exasperated and I just said, it just came out of my mouth, Kenny, I don't know. Maybe I love you, man. And it ended the argument just like that. And I realized that you can't argue with someone if there's nothing pushing against you. And it became like a magical formula that it begins by saying, I don't know. The truth is, I have my opinion like you have your opinions, but none of us know for sure what need to happen. And maybe if I listen to you, maybe if I give you the same consideration that I would like to have, maybe I'll learn something. And all I really know is that love and compassion have to be at the center of it all. Otherwise, we're not going to move very fast. So that was how the title came about. And I ultimately just began following up first and just giving talks and lectures. And every time I gave a talk on the topic, I would hear people talking about it days later. They would be just chatting and say, "Oh, I don't know, maybe I love you." And I thought, this is sticky. People are really getting this. And then ultimately the journey that I wrote about in the book, but it all started with the conversation with my younger brother.
That's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. Why do you feel there is such a pandemic of needing to be right on our planet right now?
I think we are at an interesting convergence of lots of different things that have added to uh, this moment where being right is so important for people. One thing, for example, would be the pandemic of COVID. Everyone was sure about their position, whether it be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. What is and what caused the pandemic and what didn't. Like, we became very polarized. In fact, the interesting thing is it used to be that people on the far left and people on the far right were at opposite sides. What happened during the COVID pandemic was instead of being a straight line, it started to become a circle. And people on the left and people on the right were believing the same things. They were watching the same videos, listening to the same authorities. And it became very polarized, even though they were really, in many ways, focused in the same direction. So there are certain things that we'd never really experienced before that were coming together. The politics, especially like in the US, but I think probably throughout the whole world, in the US, we had this character named Donald Trump who was using fear and division as a primary tool to control people. And therefore, you had an enormous movement of people who would just force out anyone who disagreed with them. If you were on the other side, stay over there, whether it be your parents, your siblings, your best friend. Being right became more important than loving, having compassion. And the other thing that I think really pushed the issue is social media. Social media, like anything else, can be a very positive thing or a very divisive tool. In social media, YouTube, things like this, there are algorithms which tell us what we already believe. In other words, if I'm a COVID denier or a vaccine denier, and I go on YouTube and I watch one or two videos about that, the algorithms say, well, that must be what he believes and therefore wants to hear, and then it will give me only that. Okay. So it becomes easy for me to say, well, I must be right. Everyone agrees with me. All of the authorities, the doctors that I listen to say the same thing. Well, if I were to be in favor of the vaccine, the exact opposite would happen. The algorithms would just feed me all the people that agree with me there. So it's easy to see how we started to move to opposite sides because the idea that I'm right about this because everyone else agrees with me becomes so solid. So between the pandemic, politics, algorithms, I think the soil was it was ripe for bringing us to where we are now. But and this is where I think the most positive message is. It's only when we're pushed up against the wall, we'll say, that um, the opportunity to change, the opportunity to expand ultimately grows. It may look like we're going in the wrong direction, but sometimes we have to go in the wrong direction to readjust and head back in the right direction. So I believe that this is an enormous opportunity. I believe that the more people that realize that, I don't know, I can't know everything. And maybe if I listen to you and give you the respect that you deserve, maybe we're going to have some movement. One final thing that I'll say about this, and I really think this is true. If we just began practicing some of the lessons that we learned when we were in kindergarten, things would be a lot easier. Things like be kind, listen to one another, don't interrupt. These were lessons we learned when we were 5 years old, but we forgot them. Let's go back to those simple lessons of respect and honoring. And maybe if we do that, things will begin to shift on their own.
Yeah, you're making really important points. And when I started reading your book, I realized that I didn't necessarily share the same viewpoints as you did on many of the things, for example, on the COVID vaccine, or maybe even on Trump. I don't know, maybe. I love you. I'm choosing that approach.
Yeah.
And, a year ago, I might have actually just shut the book down and walked away from it. Now I'm in a very different place in terms of the conscious evolution of my own consciousness, in terms of the compassion that I've also started to generate for different viewpoints around the whole pandemic, or pandemic, as I would rather call it. But your book is really helping me to, again, bring through that bigger window that red thread of love and compassion and kindness
Yeah.
really brings to everything. So I'm really grateful to you for that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. In fact, I'll tell one quick story, very similar. To back up a little bit, how I wrote the book was, in fact, I didn't intend to write a book, but I drove all the way from Portland, Oregon, to the east coast of the U.S. And because I was going to be doing a tour of a musical that I perform on the life of St. Francis of Assisi. And I was in New Hampshire, and a friend of mine named Walt, he and his wife were going to take me out to dinner. So we went out to dinner, and I had never met his wife, Anne, and I learned that she owns a publishing company called Summit Publishers. And I said, after at that point, 23 books, I said, I'm not going to write any more books. But if I did, this would be the book I would write. And I told her that story about my brother. And she said, if you write that book, I will publish it because that is what is so needed. We need to open up the dialogue. Like you said, we don't have to agree with each other, but we can still respect one another. We can still listen to one another. And you would probably share some things with me that would help me change my view and vice versa. This is what used to happen all the time. This was normal. Suddenly it became like we can't do that. So anyway, I was talking to her and she said she would publish the book. So I started writing that night. And I began to just meet people along the way as I traveled doing this tour, who some of whom agreed with me, some of whom did not agree with me. But probably my favorite example is probably my best friend in the whole world, whose name is Vicky. I've known Vicky for over 30 years. She's my teaching partner here at Namaste Village in Mexico. And we always assume that the people who we love the most are going to agree with us. And that's not necessarily true. So what happened was I was on my tour. I had about 3 or 4 days break, and Vicky lives in New Jersey. So I went to her house, and in beginning our conversation, I learned that she was a very, very pro Donald Trump supporter, which I immediately thought, how, okay, let me back up. Anyone who knows Vicky will say she is probably the most loving, giving, spiritual person they've ever met. So my prejudice was, how is it possible for someone to be loving and giving and spiritual and support Donald Trump? This was my prejudice, right? That I had to look at. And what I could have done as soon as I learned that, I could have immediately began trying to convince her that she was wrong. Wait a minute, what about this? What about that? And immediately claim that I'm right and you're wrong, all the things that we're talking about. But instead of doing that, I just began to listen to her and I asked questions. I got curious. Curiosity is one of the first steps in depolarization. And I asked her, tell me more. Why do you feel that he would be the appropriate person? And she shared her opinions. And then she asked me for my opinions. And during that 4 days that I was at her house, there was never a moment in which we pushed each other away or that it challenged our friendship or the love that we felt for each other. Because once again, we were practicing the things we learned in kindergarten to listen, to respect. And and it was amazing. And so there were so many situations along the way where I would meet people and just listen to them. And this is why I think what we really need today is a movement of people like you and I who are probably going to agree with each other in a lot of things and probably not in others. But we can say that what's most important is us coming together, having creative conversations, honoring one another. We need a movement of people who are willing to do this. So, one of the ways you can help join is to start with the book, or you can go to the website for the book, which is simply de-polarize.com, depolarize with a little dash.com. And one example would be we have a little survey there that will take 1 or 2 minutes, but that's helping us to design the best ways to get this movement started, to get people excited. So you can go there, fill out the survey, join us. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right or somewhere in the middle. Let's come together and realize that there are things that are much more important than me being right and you being wrong, or vice versa. Because in the end, we really want the same thing. And if we can focus on that, then this starts to get very simple very fast.
Yeah, so very true. I mean, there's so much more that unifies and unites us in our humanity than what actually separates us. So this movement, I think, is exactly what we're needing on our planet right now. So thank you
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
encouraging everyone
Yeah.
to do that.
I would love to give you an example of how I've discovered this. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've spent a lot of time doing peace work around the world, often traveling to countries where wars or conflicts were taking place to perform a peace concert using the peace prayers from the different traditions of the world, the religious traditions. And I've been to many countries, but one of them that impacted me the most was in 1998 when I was invited by Saddam Hussein to come to Baghdad and to perform the peace concert at the same time that the United States and all of its allies were looking to Iraq, and another war seemed imminent. And here they invite me to come there to perform this concert, which I knew was a propaganda move, but I don't care. You can use me for that all you want. But I was worried. I thought I'm going to be going into this country where I'm the so-called enemy. I don't know how I'm going to be received or what the people are going to be like. But when I got to Baghdad, I met many, many people who were no different than any of us. They want peace. They want safety for their children and their families. We really wanted the same thing. And I remember it was the first time actually that we did one of these worldwide meditations. Uh, at that time, not everybody even had an email address in 1998, but the email that we sent out began to spread. It became viral, and millions of people around the world stopped to simply pray and send their loving energy to that situation. And during my concert, which was at the National Theater in Baghdad, it was broadcast on national television. And then afterwards, they had a party where we sat around for hours singing Simon and Garfunkel songs in Baghdad. So if this can happen in Baghdad, I have a feeling it can happen in Finland, where you are. It can happen in the United States and Mexico, wherever we are. We can start to dissolve the things that have been pushing us apart and come back together, realizing that there are more things that are important than being right. But connecting and being together will give us what we really want.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing about that as well. And I also wanted to just mention the impact of your music on me personally as well. The very first time I listened to the Wishes Fulfilled meditation, which is set to your music, which again is aligned with the Moses Code. The very, very first time I listened and I started to hear the sound, the melody, coming through, I literally had the most potent, most powerful vision of Yeshua, of Jesus, just coming
Wow.
to me. And the energy of love that was emanating from him was so powerful that I just broke down into tears. And
Oh, wow.
that was the beginning of a very beautiful connection with him as a personal guide to me. And he's led me on an incredible journey from there. So I wanted to just also thank you from the bottom of my heart for the music that you have created and all the offerings you put out into the world. They really
Oh,
make a
you're so
difference.
welcome. I'm so glad you had that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, would you like to share a little bit more about the work that you do at Namaste Village? Because I know this is also creating a ripple effect in the world.
Yeah. Well, this is a time, I think that the basic message is it's a time to come together. It's a time to stop moving in the opposite directions and coming together. One of the ways that that's happening all over the world is by people coming together in community. That may be a community like Namaste Village where people live together, or it could just be groups who come together online, or many other ways. But I have always loved being in community with people where we live together, we come together. And so I started this community called Namaste Village here in Ajijic, Mexico. This area, by the way, is the biggest expat area in the whole world for Americans and Canadians and Europeans. So many of them live here. And so I was able to purchase a piece of property 8 years ago that at that time had about 11 small apartments. Within 2.5 years, we went from 11 to 40 houses or apartments. We're almost always full because people feel the need to join, to come together. And once again, not everyone here agrees on every subject because that's never going to happen in this world. But we love one another. We listen to one another. We respect one another. And that's what has made Namaste Village so rich. One of the things that we do every morning is we join together at 9 a.m. our time, and we just have a half hour long sharing, meditation, teaching, which people can watch on YouTube if they want. They just go to Namaste, just type in Namaste Village morning session, and they'll all come up. Or if you want the website, you can go to namaste-village.com and that'll take you to our website. But I think what's happening here is beginning to happen in many, many more places where people are joining together, not just in groups where everyone agrees. I mean, that could be dangerous where if you're only centering your life around people who have the same beliefs, the same opinions, but if you can come together as a diverse group of people who are focused not on being right, but on expansion, on enlightenment, however you want to describe that. That's what's happening here at Namaste Village, and I see it's going to be happening a lot more around the world.
That's beautiful. It's really like this microcosm of the macrocosm with all this diversity of different kinds of people with their own opinions and how it could be globally as well if we all actually did come together in that way.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time. Even with all the division and the challenges, uh, it's the best of time, it was the worst of time, like Charles Dickens wrote. But I do have a feeling that we're on the verge of something very positive. Just like in Europe, uh, there were the Dark Ages. But what followed the Dark Ages was the Renaissance, a time of great light and creativity. And I think if we can all begin to practice this, to realize I don't know, and maybe I can learn from you, but I love you. Maybe if we begin to practice this more, a new Renaissance will be born that, generations from now, they'll look back at this time and say, this is where it started. It looked like it was a very bad time, but it was actually the beginning of a very beautiful and creative time.
Yeah. And sometimes we do need to see the structures and systems that we have relied on for so long either completely crumble or at least start to shake at their foundation so that we can see
And
what's behind them, really.
amen. Yes.
Mm, beautiful. Well, James, is there anything else that's arising for you in this moment that you feel would still be important to share with our audience?
Hmm. I just hope that everyone who's listening to this wonderful podcast takes a step. Uh, it's one thing to listen to something like this and then change the channel, go to another YouTube clip or whatever it is. But to do one thing today, do one thing today that is maybe challenging. It might be calling up someone who you know you're not going to agree with on every level and just asking them to share their opinion and just listen without interjecting what you think is right or wrong. It could be something as simple as that. But if every one of us did one thing today, and then tomorrow, and then the next day, a momentum begins to build. This is what this movement of depolarization is, and it begins with people like all of us. You know, the people who are watching this, the people who are reading the book. If we just made the decision to do one thing to help get this movement going. It's going to, it may be slow at first, but it's going to build momentum. And we're going to find ourselves in a very different place in a very short period of time.
Mm, I absolutely believe in that as well. Thank you so much, James, for writing this book. And as I said before, for all the amazing offerings you have created and are offering to the world. And I really appreciate you having on the show. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Emmy. I appreciate it. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate you as well for listening and for being a part of this show. And I hope to see you at the next episode. Bye for now.